Hello, hello. This is Peter Levi from MCU and Comics with Take Two, my Episode 8 WandaVision review, and I look forward to tomorrow. Had some mic issues, which hopefully we've resolved, and we're gonna go through this. Link in the description below to my longer, more sort of detailed review of that episode. I don't want to completely rehash it, but I did want to go through my thoughts and where it may be going and so on. So, episode 8 I thought was a good episode, but not a great episode. I thought it was a step down from 7, which was a step down from 6, which was a step down from 5, which to me is probably the best episode of the show thus far. It's not a terrible episode, but it leans very heavily on emotional beats. And if those emotional beats don't work for you, this episode it's underwhelming. What carries it forward for me, because most of those beats did not work for me, is Elizabeth Olsen's performance, the little touch of Paul Bettany. Those two actors, I think, have largely carried the show, particularly given that it has a very weak B plot. That's the sword plot. At any rate, I'm not going to rehash the whole show. We'll probably have a full show review the next time. Although I don't know if I'll do it as a separate episode. It depends. But so let's go through what happened in episode 8. We did get some necessary plot development along with the emotional beats. So we open up on a flashback, and most of this episode is flashback. And this is to Agatha, where we already knew Agatha was a witch, but we see her background, where in the days of the Salem witch trials, there was a coven of witches, so I guess the persecution was correct to some extent, at least in the MCU, where Agatha is being punished by her coven, which includes her mother, who's the leader, for forbidden practices. We're not told what those practices were, other than she was too young to perform certain things. And we're also told she's irredeemably evil, although not why. It's not clear if that evilness is related to her breaking the rules. So they try to kill her, it looks like. And instead she kills them, including her mother. We don't know what importance, if any, her mother has. I have a feeling it won't have any, really. It'll just be an emotional anchor point for Agatha, very much like Monica's death. And unfortunately, because we don't spend any time with her mother, her death is, at least for me, was a shrug of the shoulders. It didn't impact me at all. And I feel like Agatha is suffering from a more acute version of what's happened with Monica, where we're told certain things about them, but in terms of what they actually do in the show, you don't really experience it. I don't want to dovetail into Monica too much, but I brought this up, I believe, after episode 7. If you were to remove Monica from the show and you were to put a random sword agent in her place, what changes in terms of plot? I don't think anything about Monica being Monica actually matters. And at least with Agatha at the moment, we're in the same place for her. It doesn't matter that it's Agatha the witch, or could it have been any witch. Currently we're at any witch. So hopefully Agatha will get a little bit more development in the final episode to give her more oomph. Certainly I hope her reason for behaving as she does isn't just, I'm bad and I want power. While you can do that with villains, it's not super engaging, especially since, unfortunately, she does not seem like she poses any threat to Wanda. Yes, she's whammied her in the previous episode, but there has never been a sense to me, especially given how skittish she was during the sitcom elements of the show, that she poses a real threat to her. Maybe the risk will be to her children. Maybe that's what they're going for, but we'll have to wait and see. So once we're through Agatha's story, we go through a lengthy flashback or series of flashbacks with Wanda. And these do perform a few functions in terms of plot. We learn that Wanda had powers before she was experimented on. We learn that in some way, shape, or form, the Mind Stone chose her. We don't know how or why. And we learn why there is a sitcom element to the reality she created for herself, and that she did indeed, as we've been told, create the reality in Westview out of her grief. Oh, and finally that she did not steal Vision's body, but instead created him, leaving the well, it's not really a corpse, but leaving his parts with Sword. So those are sort of the plot elements that this gives us. But even though that's what happens in the flashback in terms of moving the plot forward, the real purpose is meant to be like an emotional trip through Wanda's past. And the reason we know that's why that was done is those details could all have been ferreted out by Agatha either directly or through Pietro without the need of the flashback. You're talking about a few short sentences of dialogue. So this section, the flashback, which takes almost 25 minutes of the episode, which is more than half, is there purely for the emotional impact it's supposed to have. Now, for me, that did not work. We'll go through why. So the first one is Wanda as a kid. We see her parents, we see them die, and we see her whammy the bomb to make sure it doesn't go off. This didn't impact me for a couple reasons. One, we've spent no time with her parents. So outside of the little sort of cutesy interaction they have with them at the beginning, there's no level of attachment. You already know that they die. You already know why they die. And you know that Wanda has rarely, if ever, thought about them. Although when she has, it's made her sad. This doesn't, to me, add any layers to that. It puts faces to them, I suppose. But that's about it. And the experience itself, it was already described in Age of Ultron. And she already described it again in WandaVision. So to me, this felt kind of self-indulgent. And its primary purpose, I think, was to explain away the sitcom element. I mean, in terms of function, beyond the emotional part. The next one is a short scene with Hydra, and this smelled budget problems. Here we are where she was experimented on. There's no Aaron Taylor Johnson. We don't see her brother at all. And there is no Thomas Kreitzman, who played Strucker. Instead, it's a little scene, and it's two little rooms with characters from Hydra we've never seen before and we'll never see again. And without the context that we saw from Age of Ultron, to me, this just felt like filler. Yeah, you see the Mind Stone. Yeah, we see sitcoms again. But this one to me was the weakest of the flashback scenes. Then we have one from Civil War where she and Vision have a conversation. She brings up Pietro, and they bond a bit. Again, we get the sitcom element. The problem with this for me is Wanda has already mourned Quicksilver. We've seen it in Age of Ultron. We've seen it in WandaVision. And you never see Aaron Taylor Johnson, which makes the impact of that loss less. It's less visceral. So this one's held up by good performances, but it's also pretty superfluous in terms of what it gives you. And then finally we have the longest flashback, which is the preamble to the show. Wanda going to Sword, Tyler Hayward unable to act, letting her look at his body, but refusing to let her take it. She looks at it, she leaves, finds a note in her car, which we're meant to think is from Vision, although we don't technically know that left her an empty lot in Westview, and then in her grief, she creates the Hex, she creates Vision, etc. And we would run into episode 1 of WandaVision, taking over the whole town. And then we have sort of the climactic end with Agatha holding her kids hostage. Now, why aren't the kids dead? Presumably, it's so that she can make Wanda do things or to protect herself from Wanda. Those would be the logical reasons not to have just offed them in the first place. But we don't know why. We also don't know why she let Wanda out of the basement. If Wanda was trapped in the basement, why isn't she in the basement anymore? If you have her at your mercy, why on earth let her out? I have no idea. But yeah, we see combat is going to happen. I'm not a big fan of them having Catherine Hahn do the Wicked Witch of the West routine. I liked her far better before that reveal. It's kind of over the top. I find it tonally off. And it's too bad because I liked Catherine Hahn up until that point. I thought her character was good. But to me, she's kind of corny. She doesn't feel threatening. And then we have the post-credit scene, which is the reveal of White Vision as Tyler Hayward's threat. He's going to send it in, and then we're done. So after the episode dropped, I should say, the Redditor who has correctly leaked the runtimes leaked the one for the final episode, which is 50 minutes, which will be about 42-ish, less credits and whatnot. So we're never getting a long HBO or Netflix style episode to wrap up the show. And there's not a whole lot left for the show to do. We need Wanda to give up on the reality she's created. We need White Vision defeated. We need a resolution for both created Vision and the children. We need to know the tie-in to Doctor Strange, and we'll see Doctor Strange. And we also need to know who the hell Evan Peters is playing. We can skip the aerospace engineer as a thing. The director, Matt Shakeman, came out and said they're not anyone interesting, so we can forget about it. They're a bit like the Beekeeper. Although I knew the Beekeeper was no one off the top, and a lot of people were like, is that Mephisto? No, he's just a guy. I'm trying to think if there's another... Oh, Jimmy Woo's missing person. They teased that a long time ago. They've avoided him ever saying who it is. Presumably, there's a reason for that, and we'll find out who that is. Yeah, that's kind of what I expect them to have resolved. In terms of fighting, presumably White Vision will fight Created Vision, and Wanda and the kids will deal with Agatha. Monica will help in some way, and the good guys will win. I expect Agatha to survive, and then the tease for whoever she's serving to be either a post-credit or right at the end. So those are sort of my expectations. In terms of leaks for the final show, there's been 3 that I've seen, all from 4chan. 2 are kind of plausible and 1 not as much. I'll read the not as much one first because it came out first, and I'll read it to you. It starts off on the night of the Brady Bunch episode, which are episodes 3 and 4, where Wanda already had her kids, which is actually episode 5. Wanda and Vision have a short conversation about being parents, and then it cuts to them a while later being asleep in bed. Shows Wanda having a nightmare as we get flashes of Aaron Taylor Johnson, as well as the actor who played the younger version of him from episode 8, the one we just saw. Cuts to outside Agatha's yard, where Evan Peters is being formed in the same way Vision was. Agatha sees this from her window, goes out to approach him. He freaks out, comes back, asks Agatha what's going on. She hexes him, and then it cuts back to Wanda and Vision, where Vision wakes up, asks if everything's all right. She says it's fine, and he looks at her in a concerning way. The reason I don't buy this, and I think it's implausible, is we just had an episode that is primarily flashbacks. I don't think we're going to follow that up with a big chunk of flashbacks to start the final episode. And all that text really does is give you an explanation for where Evan Peters came from. I don't think the show is that interested. I think that'll be explained in 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. And we'll get to who I think he is in a second. So the next one. I have a friend who works in special effects. He mentioned that during the final battle sequence there will not be any new villain. but 2 battles: Wanda and family versus Agatha, and Vision versus Vision. Vision sacrifices himself to defeat White Vision, and Agatha gets away in the confusion. Post-credit scene is Agatha with her rabbit, who is actually Nightmare. And afterward it says Agatha will return in Doctor Strange 2. That's at least plausible. But that's also pretty easy to guess. You don't need inside information to speculate that. There's not a lot there to suggest it's specifically inside info, although it could be correct. The third and final one that I've seen, Quicksilver Evan Peters is not from the Fox universe, but is Quicksilver. It will be explained. I think that's quite likely. It would fit what Marvel did with J. Jonah Jameson in Far From Home. It fits what we've heard they're going to do with Electro in No Way Home. So I suspect a lot of the upcoming, maybe all upcoming characters from IP that Feige was not involved with will be the same character, but an MCU version, a distinct version of the same character. It gives them full creative freedom. You don't have to worry about continuity. There is no secret cameo of Magneto, Professor X, or Reed Richards. This has actually been confirmed today by the director. In fact, that secret cameo is Paul Bettany. Paul Bettany put that out to troll people. He's always wanted to act with himself. We'll get to see that. Monica's engineer friend is a Skrull. This will tie into Captain Marvel 2 and Secret Invasion. Now, the director said the engineer is no one. To me, that would actually include the Skrull, because no one cares about that character. So maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but it's a trivial character. Agatha's rabbit is someone very cool and bad. Will be teased at the end and go into Doctor Strange 2. That sounds like the previous scoop, although this person doesn't specify whether it's Nightmare, Mephisto, or whoever. Vision versus Vision is a thing. No fusing together. Okay. The battle scenes are insane, and the CGI is on par with Endgame. Everyone has their moment. I really wish fanboys would stop comparing things to Endgame. I really, really would. Just say it's very good. Don't compare it to Endgame. It's not really fair to compare other movies other than Infinity War to Endgame, because none of the other films have the emotional weight or story weight that those films have. Very sad episode, but very pleasing for a number of reasons I won't spoil. Doctor Strange appears, and it's at this very precise moment of the episode that changes the tide. That could be true. I was kind of expecting Strange not to be pivotal, so that Wanda solves her own problem, but it's certainly possible. Other notes, just to briefly go over. I wasn't a huge fan of the witches using Latin to cast spells. It's reminiscent of D&D, which is not a bad thing, but it reminded me a lot more of Harry Potter. And I find, to me, I associate Harry Potter with young adult fare, and that's usually a negative for me. It means whatever is occurring is less serious. Now, that's probably a me problem, because while I did read Harry Potter, I didn't grow up with it. But I don't tend to take it very seriously. So when I think of that, I think of something lighthearted and fun. And that sort of eliminates something being threatening. So we'll see. I mean, my impression of that may change over time. But I understand they did want to make it seem different than the magic the sorcerers use. And there's some sense to that. Other than that, I am curious with Evan Peters. Are we ever going to see him again? If he's one and done, no matter who he is, I think it's a waste of a good actor. So I hope he's not, whoever he is. You know, even if he's random guy number 5, which I don't think he will be. Like, he's a good enough actor. I wouldn't want them to just get rid of him. Although they did that with Karl Urban. They've done that with good actors before, where they've included them in a film and then just said, never see you again, and moved on. So, we'll see what happens with him. I don't expect him to have a very prominent role, though, in the finale. Outside of that, I hope it's a good conclusion. I feel the show, on the whole, has been tremendously uneven. It's had excellent performances from Bettany and Olsen, but the writing has been kind of all over the place. They clearly cared most about the sitcom elements, and that's the stuff that is the most well-written, even though for me the comedy was hit and miss. The B plot has not been great. Monica's origin has not been great. And like, none of the characters really in the Sword plot are particularly good. They sort of range between mediocre to bad once you get to Hayward. So I hope it has a great ending, but I do feel like retrospectively the general sentiment will be pacing was a bit off and it promised more than it could deliver. If they drop the show all at once, you can get away with the mystery box format. But when you're doing it weekly, people are going to come up with better ideas than are in the show. And when they see that those better ideas aren't being fulfilled, you are going to disappoint people. That's one of the problems with following the J.J. Abrams model of mystery boxes, is that it's almost impossible to deliver on what you're teasing people with. At any rate, though, that'll wrap up for me. Like I said, I will do a full show review either as part of a regular news digest or on its own. It just sort of depends. And when the next one comes out, I'm not 100% sure. I've nearly finished my Scooper article, as well as my Wolverine Origin article. The Scooper one will come out before the Wolverine one. And we will go from there. But thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time.